All right, welcome back to my orchid and plant life. So today we are going to take a look at my Phalaenopsis that I've transitioned into LECA. It has been a little over 6 weeks. It was done on the 4th of June. And good news is I was able to identify her because I was walking in my local Lowe's and I was like, oh my gosh, that's red stripes. And it had a tag. And I looked it up, and so this is actually what my Phalaenopsis is. So that is exciting that I was able to identify her. So what I thought we'd do today is I'm going to take her out of the LECA and kind of look and see, because there are some roots growing. I just took her out from a flush. So before we do that though, as you can see, she's got a new leaf growth here. And I did cut the flower spike about 2 days after I repotted her into the LECA, because the flowers were just kind of going over. So I was like, well, let me cut it off and get her growing. So she started this leaf growth probably about 2 weeks ago, and we have root growth coming out. And of course, the spike that she had right here, it just stopped, which is fine. But let me take this moss off of here real quick. And that's another reason I want to put some fresh moss on here as well. If we look in the pot, let me get some of this LECA out of here real quick. Let's see. I'm gonna put the LECA in this pot here. Try not to get the moss as well. But inside this pot, there is actually new root growth going. Let me be very careful so I don't break it. Look at that. See all those new root tips coming out? So I figured we'd take her out, kind of see what's going on in the pot, cut off any that might have died off from the repot, and put her in a fresh setup with all the dead cut off. So that's all I see on there. So I'm just going to pour this LECA, because I'm just going to reuse it back in, and we'll just pour the LECA out here as much as we can. Let's see. So she's not too settled in there, which is good. So let me just pour that out, and we'll take all the stuff that might. See, there was a dead piece of velamen in there. And we'll just take out what floats to the top here. Not too bad actually, but there are quite a bunch of dead roots that were expected, obviously, because she transitioned from the moss into LECA. And what I've been doing is I've been keeping her soaking. There's been water in the reservoir 24/7. So what I've done is I put enough water in there for all of the LECA to be nice and wet, and then I would drain it out and put just enough to keep the wick wet. And then in addition to that, I would, every other watering, I put in CalMag, and then she would get a flush, and then I would put in my MSU fertilizer and she would get a flush. So I've been doing that since I transitioned her. Let's see if any of these other ones are going to fall off before we get going here. I just don't want to mess up any of the new root tips that are growing, because then that will defeat the purpose of what our experiment is all about. So, and I got another stick just in case this one was a little rotted, plus it's a little bit shorter. So I'm going to use this one here because it's a little bit shorter. But I think she's doing really well. I've kept her obviously in the same lighting as she was initially when she was getting acclimated to my home. And these have been sterilized, so let's just cut off all of these dead roots here, because she's got lots of new roots coming in. And then this way, none of this decay will ruin the inside of the pot. Let's see, is that one? Yep, that one is dead all the way up. Because I had read somewhere that you should actually take your plants out when you're transitioning them from one media to another, especially such a drastic change as I did with the LECA, to kind of get rid of all of the decaying matter. Like, even though this root here is really soft right here, but you see it's nice and healthy here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to peel back this velamen, because the root inside is still green and it's still going to be able to provide sustenance through the system. So, and then I'll go ahead and pull off all the dead from here. Again, let's just set her up for the best success because she's doing really, really well. I'm very, very impressed. So Nina from Ninja Orchid will also be doing an update today on Bubblicious, I believe. But the Phalaenopsis that she broke the code on how to transition into leca. Because as we all know, she grows all of her orchids in self-watering semi-hydro. And she struggled for a very long time on trying to get Phalaenopsis transitioned over. Well, the hybrids. I think the summer bloomers she was pretty successful with just because they do like a more moist environment anyway. But, so she's going to do her update on her Bubba today as well. And since we started this together, we were chatting and like, let's just do an update at the same time. And again, we have another root that is fairly healthy at the bottom, but the velamen was desiccated. So I'm just gonna take that off as well. And I'm not gonna rinse her at the sink or anything like that because with the flushing and whatnot, it's going to get rid of any extra that little smaller pieces. It's these big pieces that were not all coming out. And I knew she had some dead roots in there because when I was flushing, I would see the velamen pieces coming out because the slots on here are fairly large. So I was able to see that come through, and that's how I knew I needed to get in here and clean her up. And like I said, she's got new root tips growing, so those are going to be the ones that are going to take over the older roots because they are going to become used to or acclimated to this setup. Alrighty, so let me just take out this here. And there must be a embargo on moss. I have had the hardest time getting moss and finally found some on Amazon and ordered 2 blocks of it. I didn't want the big ginormous one because they had one in there for like $95, like $100. I wasn't going to get that much moss. I just needed the smaller ones, but I have not been able to find them. So is anybody else having issues finding moss in your area? Let me make sure here. There. Let's make sure we get all the gritties out of here before we start putting stuff in. Yep, I think that's good. All right, so I'm going to put some down here at the bottom. Again, just to make it a little gentler on my roots. See, probably need to put this on this side since there we go. All right, so this is turning into quite the success, and I may end up going ahead and transitioning maybe 1 or 2 more of my phals and just kind of slowly do it because like I said, I'm not planning on moving my entire collection to self-watering. But it would be nice to have the bulk of my phals in this, just because it is making life a lot easier for me on this one here. Because although initially when I first put her in, I was having to pay a lot of attention to her, now that she's kind of settled in, it's actually less maintenance. So I shall see. I'll continue with this one, and like I said, if I do it, I'll probably wait till next spring instead of trying to do it kind of in the middle of the growing season and then do it next spring at the beginning of the growing season so that they're already in growth mode and the transition will be a little easier. Plus, watching Nina's earlier video as far as the transitioning, I will wait for new root growth to begin if I can before I move them over. Whereas with this one, I didn't wait for that. I just kind of stuck her in there. I was in a hurry. All right, so I am going to take some of the water out now that she's kind of where I want her. And I probably should have put it in something else because the leca is now getting really low. So I'm trying to take my hand here. And I will post the first video that I did when I initially put her in the leca setup, so you can kind of see what she looked like then, because she did have her bloom spike on, looking fabulous. But like I said, I did cut that off just because the blooms were starting to go over and she was not looking her best. And I know a lot of people like to keep the blooms until the blooms fade off, but without a healthy plant, you are never going to see those blooms. Well, I'm not going to say never. You'll see the blooms again, but it might be quite some time while it tries to recover from the shock of what we did to it. So I'm a believer in cutting the spike, even if the spike is still pretty, but if there's any stress to the orchid, I believe in cutting that spike so that she can focus on recovering and getting healthy so that she can give me an even better spike possibly the next time. And I mean, I'm going to do this leca a little bit higher where this new root is growing in so that it can go down in the pot. And then I got some fresh moss. It is the moss I don't really like using, so I'm not going to do too much of it because the moss that I ordered is supposed to be here next week. So I will put a little bit here just to keep that root tip from drying out and as it goes into the pot. All right, so let's get a little bit of the moss. And I'll just put it right there so that it stays. And then I've been spraying the moss as well, just once a day. I'm not keeping it too wet. I'm just spraying it about once a day, just enough to keep it from being too dry at the top. But like I said, with this new root, I want it to go down into the media just to encourage, again, more growth. Now, eventually, I will let the roots be aerial, go in the pot, do whatever they want to do. But right now, because she is not limited, but a lot of the roots that are still on there are old roots that may or may not desiccate as the new roots are taking off. I do want to give her as much chance at success as possible. I'll just put a little bit of water on that. And then what I'll do is, today is the day that I don't have any water in the reservoir. I've been once a week letting the reservoir be completely dry. I let her sit for about 24 hours and then I'll add in some more water, whether it be just plain distilled water or if it's the distilled water with either CalMag or the MSU fertilizer to help with growth. So I don't see any, she so far doesn't show any signs of any deficiencies, and her leaves aren't stiff, at attention stiff, but they're not droopy either. Now this one down here does look a little dry and dehydrated looking. However, I believe she's absorbing that one because it is starting to lighten up a bit, and it is the oldest leaf on this particular orchid. So there is that. And then I will also be doing an update in the next week or so on how the other orchids are doing and what my prediction is as far as getting them all to bloom in the fall. Because remember, that was kind of my goal. I wanted to get as many of my orchids to bloom in the fall. So a lot of them I cut the flower spikes early. I'm thinking that this one here might actually be part of that blooming because she is doing so well and doing so much growth, and there is a potential for let's see, probably two places for her to give me a double spike, because that would be awesome. And I think that's it for now. So once she starts doing other things, obviously we'll do another update. Go check out Nina's update on her Bubba, and I hope you enjoyed. Go ahead and give this video a like if you do, and leave a comment if you grow in semi-hydro, and let me know how you think I'm doing and if you have any tips to continue the success story. All right, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on the next one.